begin custom animating, the first thing we'll want to do is position the gun in its idle position. For this, we'll go ahead and select the gun controller, open up our move tool, and just move it up a bit. That way it's in the range of the camera, which if you go to panels, perspective, depth mesh camera, we can now see. We're going to position where we think it should look good. I'll go ahead and disable the grid, that way we can see a bit better. That should be a good position for now. One thing to know is that sometimes whenever you go to put the gun in-game, it might not be in the same position as before. It'll usually be a bit further up, so you'll want to animate a bit closer than you would like. That way you can see a bit more in-game. Next, one thing we'll want to do is select these little cubes that are behind the hands. Will be where we'll manipulate quite a bit about the fingers, the spread of the fingers, and also whether or not it's controlled by one of the two controllers, either this rectangular thing or the globe. We'll go ahead and want to set the IK gun switch to 10 to start off with. This will move in a bit weird position, but that's alright, because we can just move it around a bit more later. Then we'll want to do the same thing in this hand. Now let's go ahead and position the hands. You will notice that if you try moving your hands a bit too far, it'll kind of stretch out, and if you go too far, it'll do this. What you can do is, you can click this cube that surrounds the shoulders, and move it down. You'll notice that the elbow, or the arm, will kinda go in a weird direction, and that's because this little grid outline thing, I don't know what to call it, the pole V left hand, or left arm we'll call it, is actually controlling where this joint is. So you can just move it around to wherever you like. Then we can move the hand back up. And just rotate it around a little bit. That should be good like that. Now we'll go ahead and use this little controller for the first time, besides the IK gun switch, to control the fingers. Obviously, each one is named after the names on your fingers: thumb, index, middle, ring, and pinky. We're going to select the first four. Now let's go ahead and mess around to see which way they curl. A positive will make them curl inwards. A negative will make them curl outwards. We'll go ahead and go with inwards for this one. If we look in here, we can't see the fingers, which is fine. Now for the thumb, we'll go ahead and make it go outwards. That's a little too much. Now let's go ahead and actually mess with some of the joints. As you can see, these little pluses around the fingers control the different parts of the fingers. The further back you go, the more you affect the hand. So let's move that in. Just so then this joint is kind of touching the gun, or the finger part it's controlling. Now we'll go ahead and extend this one out. And then we'll extend this one out. That looks pretty good. Now if we look in here, that looks alright. Now we'll go ahead and do the right arm. The right arm will, as you could probably guess, be controlling the trigger. So we'll just keep moving it around. That should be good there for the index finger. Ooh. That's a little bit better. Go ahead and rotate it inwards. And that'll be fine. We probably will not be seeing the trigger whenever we go to animate the gun, so it won't matter. So we don't want to move the index this time, but we'll want to move the middle, ring, and pinky. So left click drag, and let's go with 3. We'll want to go ahead and actually move this back joint ourselves. And then we'll want to go ahead and move this back one for the ring and pinky. The back one moves both at the same time, but whenever you move up here, this one will control the ring, and this one will control the pinky. Next we want to move the thumb around. It looks pretty good like that, although it does go into the gun just a little bit. So just move it back. And that should be fine. And this will be our idle position. I'll go over some of the basic controls and whatnot in my other animation rig file where I use the Vapor, which you saw in my previous video showing it in game. As you can see in this animation file where I animated the Vapor, I used quite a bit of amount of frames. A good idea whenever you're making custom animation is to use as many frames as you need to be able to make the animation. Something I'd recommend is to figure out how much time you think your reload should take for your gun, and then multiply it by 30 to get the total amount of frames for your animation. Sometimes you may end up using more or less than what you originally planned. Originally I had thought about maybe using a 4-second reload for the reload empty, so I went ahead and did 120, and it ended up being 125. The good thing about using quite a few amount of frames is that you'll be able to have a more fluid animation and make the gun move around a bit more. So as you can see, I have this rectangular prism up here, but it's not controlling the gun, or the hand I should say. This is because whenever we did that IK gun switch to 10, it made it to where what controls the hand was this globe here. Whenever you set the IK gun switch to 0, as I did here, nope, actually right here, yep, here, that means that now this does not control the hand anymore, but this does. As you can see, whenever you look here in our little cube, I use a variation of the curls as I move the gun around. Whenever you're making the player move his hand away from the gun, a good idea might be to make him uncurl the fingers. You can do that by either manually modifying the joints here under rig joints, or you can modify it under the cube here with the curls. Usually -3 or -4 will do pretty well for uncurling the middle index, ring, and pinky fingers. And then you can also modify the amount of spread the fingers have. Here in the beginning, I gave it 8, but whenever you look here, it's set to 6.5. Here it's set to 5. And really you just want to experiment to see which ones actually fit your gun better. Notice that whenever you have the IK gun switch for 10 over here, it also just stays with the gun controller. That is actually the main advantage of using the two. Whenever you're using the IK gun switch set to 0 and it's being controlled by this, it does not move with gun controller. That way you can have your animations keep your right hand, for example, on the trigger, but your left hand moving the clip in and out of the gun. Now, as you can see, many of you probably did not realize this if you've never experienced anything with animations before, but the gun, or the clip that you reload with, is actually the same clip that you take out of the gun. It's not a new clip as it would be in real life. So some of the other things we can take a look at is what I use to modify the thumb. If you have a base position, for example, whenever we had the thumb here, you could actually move it around by first saving it, that way you don't lose your position, and then changing it in a different frame, and then later on save it again, and then move it back to the original position. It's quite common to do this sort of thing, that way you don't have to lose your original position. So for reload, it's up to you however you want to make it. You can make them just do a standard pull out the clip and then put it away, or you can go a bit fun, and for example here, I went ahead and hit the gun to make the clip go out, and then he puts the clip back in. To be able to animate the clip, we use the tag clip that we used originally in the view model. You'll want to save the position before, or the frame before you'll want the clip to go out, or a few frames beforehand, and then just continue saving the frames as you move along. A good idea is to have this little auto keyframe toggled. That way whenever you move something around, let's say I go here and do this, it'll automatically save it for you without having to press S over and over and over again. The way I made my clip move was, first I figured out how am I going to position the hand. So I went ahead and just tried figuring out where the clip was going to be without actually moving the clip. So actually all these animations right here I did without at first moving the clip. Then later on, whenever it was time to move the clip, I went ahead and made sure, as you can see, I saved a lot of these keyframes. I saved each frame, that way the clip seemed to stay in the same position in the player's hand, and then goes back into the clip or into the gun and stays there. Then you would do a similar thing with any other part of the gun, for example the bolts. If we go and select here, you can see it's saved here. He moves it back, and then it launches forward. Whenever you want to move your gun around, as you can see, first it's here, then it moves towards the right, so that way the player can hit it more easily, and moves down. You just simply move around the gun controller and save it on each frame, and if you move it, for example, if you've got the auto keyframe toggled, it'll save your position that you set. You kind of want to make sure you move your gun around, that way it reacts to your hand instead of just staying in one position. Now let's move on to some of the other animations. Here we've got fire. Fire is pretty one of the easier animations to make besides idle. For fire, really you could just move the gun controller back and then bring it back forward. As you can see here. It launches back and then slowly comes back forward. You could also animate the bolt in the case that you're going to be doing a last shot animation where the bolt stays back, similar on the Scar H on Black Ops 2, and also quite a few different guns. For putting away or pulling out the gun, you'll want to do similar to the reload, the IK gun switch to 0. That way you can move one hand away, unless you're going to have just both hands move the gun back. For this one I decided to make the hands separate from the gun. And then pull out, you could just copy and paste the frames to be kind of a mirror of each other. So you can see here, they go that way, and they come back up for the pull out. For sprinting, you kind of want to imagine how would you actually sprint with this specific gun. You could just go crazy and do some weird sprinting that may not make any sense, but it's up to you. Usually whenever you sprint, you'll want to move the gun to your lower left. Now when you sprint loop, you'll want to bring the gun to your right, and then bring it back to your left. For sprint loop, you want to make sure you've got a pretty good looping animation, because this is obviously one of the animations that will loop continuously until you stop sprinting. Then you sprint out, just bring the gun back to its original position in idle. Now for one of the most very famous animations, the ADS animation. To be able to make your ADS animation, you simply just need to use one controller, and it's this one right back here behind the camera, called Torso Controller. As you see here, I saved it in one position. What you could do is you could actually animate the entire gun and leave ADS for the last thing. The good thing about doing that is that with ADS you can see first how your gun looks like, and in the case, let's say I want to move it a bit further back, or at least be able to let you see more of the back part, I can bring it forward, and now if we look, all of our animations will continue to play just as they were, but you'll be able to see more of the gun. Then you'll want to save that first frame, and then the next time you save, I did 10 frames later, you want to have it in the position where you're aiming down the sights of the gun. Something that you might want to try doing while you're doing this is go down to Deathmesh or Arms Top GRP, Tag View, Cambone, Camera, click on the camera here, come here to the focal length, and then change it around until you can position your ADS to be just to the right spot. So you can increase it so you can see better, or decrease it to just have a general idea. Usually I set mine to 20 to be able to get a bit more accurate feeling of how the gun will look like in-game. Then, whenever you go to do the ADS down, you just simply bring it back to the original position, which you can do easily by holding right click, or just right click once in 2012, click copy, and then go to 400, or whatever frame your ADS down ends on, and do paste. And the last frame I did actually for this animation was the ADS fire. If you use your fire animation, you could end up having your gun going up really high, and if you do idle, you have a gun with no recoil. What I recommend for ADS fire is just simply only move the gun back, but do not rotate it up as I did in the original. So as you see, it's a perfect going backwards animation, and then bring it back forward. Whereas if we look over here, where our fire is, he lifts the gun up a bit. It's really up to you however you want to make your animations. If the gun has animations originally from a different game, you might want to try to replicate it best you can. But whenever you do custom animating, I recommend just going with whatever you can create it with your imagination. And sometimes it might look really good. Once you're done with everything, now it's time to be able to export the model and the animations. You'll want to make sure to have the Call of Duty World at War plugin for Maya installed. If you're using 2012, 2013, and also 2014 and 15, you're going to want to use UGX8's plugin for exporting. For 8.5, however, you'll want to use the Treyarch's plugin that's included in the mod tools. I'll link in the description links to both tutorials that'll show how to install the one for 8.5 by Cinnabar, and then the one to install Aiden's plugin by himself. I'll be going over the version using Aiden's plugin since that's what I currently use. However, for 8.5 it's going to look a bit different, but it's the same general setup. In the case you have more animations than slots here, what you can do is you can save Maya and then close it. Go to your documents, Maya, 2012 x64, scripts, and then open up his .py file with Notepad, and then just go here to export window num slot and change it to however many you need. For usual things, 20 should be a good enough number. So now you just want to go into order. You can go out of order and go into, let's say, start with all the way over here with the ADS and then work your way back to reload empty, but it's up to you however you want to do it. So what you'll want to do is for the frames, you'll want to start with wherever your animation starts, so 1 or 0. And then the second number, you'll want to put down where your animation ends. So in this case, mine is 120. FPS does not matter for these animations since the amount of time they take is controlled by the weapon file. However, if you're going to be using, for example, an idle loop where your gun moves around whenever you're in the idle position, you'll want to make sure that you set this to whatever suits your gun. So let's say you had a 240 frame idle loop and your gun moves around at a 30 FPS, then you want to change this to 30 FPS or 25, 24, whichever one suits your gun. I'll show how to do note tracks using Tom's Xanim export plugin since it's a lot easier than with this one. Then you'll want to click here on the Save To and direct it to where your Xanim folder is. Whenever you first launch the plugin, it'll ask you to set the path for your game directory. If this is going to be for World at War, then you'll want to go ahead and put it to your World at War directory, and so on and so forth. Next, you'll want to go ahead and then click right down here at the bottom of the outliner view where it says Def Mesh, Def View Skeleton. Right click and then click on Select Set Members. This will select all the joints you will need for any regular animation, not ADS. So you hold down Control and then click on the gun joints because it does not select it by default. So you just need to make sure you go Tag Torso, Tag Weapon, and then select them. Then click Save Selection. If you're going to be exporting multiple animations at once, you can set this here, and then move on to the next anim, which was the reload animation. And then this time, you just want to change the first frame to whichever frame your animation starts on, so 125 for me. And then put the last frame as wherever your animation ends, 225. And you just continue, making sure you click Save Selection each time you do an anim. And then whenever you get to your ADS animations, this is where the settings change. Just go ahead and find where I put it. Here it is. To be able to export ADS, it's actually quite easy. All you do is click on Tag View, hold Control, and click on Tag Torso, save it, and then you can export it. Make sure whenever you do all of your animations, you're ready to export those. If you've been using the Use Current slot for Export Multiple, then you just click here and it'll export all of your animations. Once you're done, we just need to make one more thing in this file, and that is what's called the animated model. To do an animated model, just simply click the three dots and direct it to your model export folder, and then call it whatever you'd like. I called mine animated model because I have it in a separate folder for the Vepr specifically. And here, what you'll want to do is select Mesh Def View Skeleton again, go to Select Set Members, hold Control and click on the J-Gun, Magazine, Reload, Tag Breast, Tag Flash, whichever joints your gun has. Click on Tag View as well, and then select one mesh out of the scene. You can just simply select one of the arms. Then you go Save Selection, and then Export Selected. For here I just selected the left arm. Once you're done, now you can just save your scene. And then you go back to your view model. As you can see with this Vepr, I've removed the strap. So all you do for exporting your model, which actually I'll go ahead and do in our M417. There it is. Don't save. Oh, this is the wrong file. Or file read. There it is. Don't save. To export the model, make sure you've already set your shading to white for the gun, or you applied the color white. Then you just go up here, click on Export Model, click the three dots, direct it to your model export folder, and then you want to call it whatever your model will be called in-game. So for this, I'll just call it Roll-On M417 underscore view to let me know that's the view model of the gun. Then we'll go ahead and select both J-Gun and then the group, edit select hierarchy, save selection, export selected, yes, and continue. If everything's set up properly, it should export with no errors. To make a world model of your gun, you can just simply go File, Save Scene As, go and change this to an MA, Tutorial World Model, continue. Your world model will go ahead and detach the skin for the gun. So select hierarchy for both J-Gun and the group, skin, detach skin, delete J-Gun, and then now we'll go ahead and bring in another reference file. We'll go ahead and use the M27 again. HK416 world, drag it onto the scene. As you see, the gun is further back than usual. This is because whenever you do the world model, you'll want to make sure that it lines up with your player's animations. So now we'll just go ahead and move it back. If you do not happen to have the Black Ops 2 models, or you are only limited to what you have in World at War, then you can use Tom's Xmodel Utils program to export the .ma of one of the world models, and then use that for your reference, as I'm doing here. The main thing you just want to line up is the trigger, and then the rest should be fine, since the world model's animations usually aren't perfect. Then you can just delete the meshes, keep the joints, and then just bind the gun to whatever you have here. We just delete sights. World at War does not animate the clip whenever you're in the world model, so you can just select all the meshes, go skin, bind skin, smooth bind, and you're done. Then you go and export the model. This time we're going to change the name. And this time I'll put Roll-On M417 World. Then we'll select both groups, select hierarchy, save selection, export, Yes. And there you have it. So now in the next part, I'll show you how to convert all of these assets to work in WorldWoW.